This video is a brief examination of an assortment of cases of cryptids that have been cited across the United States. We leave it up to the viewer to decide for themselves if these creatures are indeed real or imaginary. Vampires, zombies, werewolves. These are the monsters who strike fear into the hearts of children. They're the same ones that parents chase away and try to reassure their kids that there's no such thing as monsters. Let's examine some alleged real monsters across America. Ever heard of the Dover Demon? For 2 days in 1977, the town of Dover, Massachusetts was under attack from a strange creature that seemed to have arrived from another world or dimension. The first encounter with this thing, nicknamed the Dover Demon, occurred on the evening of April 21st. A man named Bill Bartlett was out on a drive with some friends, and then they saw something strange climbing on a stone wall. The creature appeared to be only about 3 feet tall, but had a giant oversized head with large, glowing eyes. The rest of the body was tan and hairless, with long, thin arms and legs. Several hours later, the same creature was spotted by a 15-year-old named John Baxter, who watched it scuttle up a hillside. The following day, a couple reported seeing this demon, as it was referred to as well. When authorities asked for description, the couples had a direct match to the ones given by other witnesses, except for one difference. The creature the couple encountered appeared to have glowing orange eyes. Despite repeated attempts to locate it, this monster was never seen again. Momo. In the early 1970s, reports came flooding in of a strange creature roaming the woods near a small town in the state of Missouri, standing about 7 feet tall. Momo, short for Missouri Monster, was completely covered in jet black fur. The first major report came in July 1971 when Joan Mills and Mary Ryan claimed to have been harassed by a half-ape, half-man creature that made terrifying noises at them as they passed it on Highway 79. Both women believed it would have harmed them if it had been given the chance. That seemed to be confirmed the following year. On July 11, 1972, brothers Terry and Wally Harrison spotted a giant hairy beast carrying a dead dog. The boys screamed, alerting the family members who caught a glimpse of the creature before it disappeared into the woods. Sightings continued for a couple of weeks, but Momo hasn't been seen since. The Lawndale Thunderbird. If you're ever in Lawndale, Illinois, keep a keen eye open for gargantuan birds lest they sneak up on you and snatch you away. That's what happened in 1977 when Lawndale residents noticed 2 monster-sized birds with equally massive-sized wingspans encircling them in the sky overhead. The birds, though enormous, seemed harmless enough. That is, until they swooped down and one of them reportedly tried to take off with 10-year-old Marlon Lowe while he played in his yard. The boy was not seriously injured, but the Thunderbird did manage to lift him several feet off the ground and carry him for nearly 40 feet before dropping him to a thud back to earth. Over the next few weeks, the birds were seen flying over various houses and fields in nearby towns, but thankfully they didn't clutch anyone else in their fearsome talons. And though they appeared to have left Lawndale for good, reports of these gigantic winged creatures continue to be reported across the U.S. The Goat Man. Do you think that goats are cute and fuzzy little creatures? Well, if so, a trip through Prince George's County in Maryland might just change your mind. Since the 1950s, people have reported horrifying encounters with a creature known only as the Goat Man. From afar, many claim to have mistaken the Goat Man for a human being, but as he approaches near, his cloven hooves become visible, as do the horns growing out of his head. Now, if that's not enough to make you shriek in terror, reports as recent as 2016 state that the Goat Man now carries an axe with him. The Florida Gatorman. The swamplands of Florida are filled with alligators, but most of them don't have human attributes. Since the 1700s, tales of strange half-man, half-alligator creatures have circulated throughout the area. Gatormen are described as having human-like features, at the same time having the midsection, back legs, and tail of an alligator. Unlike other creatures, gatormen reportedly run in packs and hunt together, and also have developed their own verbal language to communicate with each other. What's more, recent sightings have them traveling outside of the state of Florida and taking up residence in swamplands of Louisiana and swimming around in Texas. The Florida skunk ape. Since the 1960s, a creature has been spotted in the Florida Everglades that many call Bigfoot's horribly smelling cousin, the skunk ape. This beast is said to closely resemble Bigfoot with one minor difference: it smells like rotten eggs. In late 2000, Sarasota police received an anonymous letter from a woman who complained that an escaped animal was roaming near her home at night. Included with the letter were 2 close-up photos of a large beast that resembled an orangutan standing behind some palmetto fronds, gnashing its teeth at her. The horror of Scape Ore Swamp, the Lizard Man. At around 2 a.m. on June 29, 1988, Christopher Davis got a flat tire on a dark back road near the Scape Ore Swamp in South Carolina. Just as the teenager finished changing the tire, he was suddenly attacked by a 7-foot-tall creature with scaly green skin and razor-sharp teeth. Davis was able to get back into his vehicle and speed away, but not before the Lizard Man managed to climb onto the roof and claw at it, trying to get inside. As the horrified teen drove, he could see that this beast had 3 claws on each of its hands. Eventually, the creature fell from the car, and Davis was able to escape. The creature is yet to be captured or categorized. The devil monkeys. Far and away, some of the strangest creatures said to be roaming the countryside are devil monkeys. Now, take an adult kangaroo, stick a monkey or baboon head on top of it, and you've got yourself a devil monkey. By most accounts, these creatures can cover hundreds of feet in just a few quick hops, and they're nothing to tangle with either. Although devil monkeys have traditionally stuck to attacking livestock and the occasional family pet, some reports have them attempting to claw their way into people's homes. Originally spotted in Virginia in the 1950s, devil monkeys have now been spotted all across the United States. On a related note, in May 2001, residents of New Delhi, India were sent into a panic when a 4-foot-tall, half-monkey, half-human creature began attacking them as they slept. The Mothman of Point Pleasant. On November 12, 1966, 5 men who were digging a grave at a cemetery near Clendenin, West Virginia, claimed to have seen a man-like figure fly low from the trees over their heads. This is often identified as the first known sighting of what became known as the Mothman. Shortly thereafter, on November 15, 1966, 2 young couples from Point Pleasant, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Steve and Mary Mallett, told police they saw a large gray creature whose eyes glowed red when the car's headlights picked it up. They described it as a large flying man with 10-foot wings following their car while they were driving in an area outside of town known as the TNT area, the site of a former World War II munitions plant. During the next few days, other people reported similar sightings. 2 volunteer firemen who saw it said it was a large bird with red eyes. Mason County Sheriff George Johnson commented that he believed the sightings were due to an unusually large heron he termed shypoke. Contractor Newell Partridge told Johnson that when he aimed a flashlight at a creature in a nearby field, its eyes glowed like bicycle reflectors, and blamed buzzing noises from his television set and the disappearance of his German Shepherd dog on the creature. Wildlife biologist Dr. Robert L. Smith at West Virginia University told reporters that descriptions and sightings all fit the sandhill crane, a large American crane almost as high as a man with a 7-foot wingspan featuring circles of reddish coloring around the eyes, and that the bird may have wandered out of its migration route. This particular crane was unrecognized at first because it was not native to this region. After the December 15, 1967 collapse of the Silver Bridge and the death of 46 people, the incident gave rise to the legend and connected the Mothman sightings to the bridge collapse. The Mothman Prophecies in 2002 is a major motion picture loosely based on the 1975 book by the same name by John Keel. According to Georgian newspaper Svobodnaya Gruzia, Russian ufologists claimed that Mothman sightings in Moscow foreshadowed the 1999 Russian apartment bombings. In 2016, WCHS-TV published a photo purported to be of the Mothman taken by an anonymous man while driving on Route 2. Science writer Sharon A. Hill proposed that the photo showed a bird, perhaps an owl, carrying a frog or snake away, and wrote that there is zero reason to suspect it is the Mothman as described in legend. There are too many far more reasonable explanations. So there you have it. Do you believe in these monsters? Do you think that they exist, or are they mass hallucinations, or figments of the imagination? The choice is yours to decide. The night air had a tinge of moisture to it. Light vapors gracefully whipped about the atmosphere, briefly glistening as rays from the bright, full moon accentuated their forms. The coolness of the evening could be considered tolerable, even as it had a slight prickliness to it. Twisted oak trees writhed a dance of visual torment as their decrepit branches interlocked and fastened with each other high above the ground. Moss swayed and fluttered in the breeze, resembling torn cloth from a girl's dress. Even though the environment was abundant with its serenity, a foreboding threat wandered the grounds. Approaching the locked gates of a nearby forgotten cemetery, the being known to mankind as Lucifer stood before them. His cloak and hood slowly swayed in the evening breeze, much like the dance of the moss hanging from the oak trees. He noticed that an oversized padlock bound the gates together. He also noticed that the lock was old, rusty, and was nearly fused to the hook latch that held the gates together and was overgrown with foliage. The lock hadn't been released in ages, centuries maybe.
The appearance of the cemetery with its broken and rust-ridden wrought iron posts and spikes, along with the buildup of several veins and arteries of dry rotted vines as well as fresh new overgrowth, gave evidence that this resting ground had been undisturbed in forever. This appearance was surely a prelude to how the interior was going to be. This was indeed the one he sought. He knew that. He stared at the padlock for a few seconds, and as he did, the growth which smothered it began to pop and crackle. Small streams of smoke ascended, resembling small, thin serpents as they rose skyward. A reddish glow started to envelop the padlock as the growth, both old and new, was burned away. As the devil's gaze grew more fixed upon the lock, the ancient steel began to liquefy, turning into a viscid lava. It was a slow process as the metallic liquid lazily dripped and ebbed down the sizzling lines of the weeds as well as the bracings of the gate. Once the padlock was completely gone, he simply blew a slight wisp of breath toward the gates, and they flew open with enough force to equal 10 men kicking them open. Leaves from the growth, which clutched the gate, showered to the ground in small cyclones as Lucifer slowly treaded inside. His steps were a slow procession among the ankle-high mists which obscured his hooves. Subtle moans and weeping seemed to be audible from within the earth under some of the graves, moans which seemed to explain the fear and agony recognizing the presence of the one who walked the ground above. Now, as this was obviously an unkempt, deserted resting place, the overgrowth was so thick as to hide nearly every headstone which stood low to the ground. Lucifer's gaze surveyed the area in search of one grave, one soul, his best advocate and servant. It had been an eternity, it seemed, since he had heard his prayers, but then Lucifer had become consumed. The apocalyptic prophecies were rapidly approaching, and the war plan was his all-consuming passion. His guilt for not hearing his servant's prayers and praises, however, was minimal after all. He is the author of cruelty and the father of anger. Still, when news met his ear regarding the tragedy that happened to him, a silent rage blistered within his blackened heart. A rage that was directed toward both the Almighty as well as to the people who were responsible for it. How could this patent failure have happened, he thought. He still recalls the night that he received the news. It was storming in the place where he was meditating. The place was as somber and as darkened as his own heart. It was a disgusting, slimy alleyway in the seediest section of a godless city. In fact, the only amulet that may have echoed a memory of a holy god was a broken, chipped stone cross which perched high above an abandoned storefront that was used at one time by a congregation as a church. Its dead silhouette shone black against the lightning skies, which strobed periodically during the storm. Bodies of the drunken and drugged littered the alley among piles of trash and filth. Drums blazed with fires that were used by vagrants to keep warm. This was the perfect place, complete with its pain and anguish. Here, he could concentrate and feed upon the feast of hopelessness and negativity. A demon approached him to relay the news of his servant. He informed the devil that he had been cruelly slain by knights of the Almighty, and then his corpse was defiled in accordance with Christian rites of vampiric purging. 2 members of the order had destroyed his servant in the most humiliating fashion. The slaughter had been calculated, planned with extreme surgical care, and according to the ritual, could never again be undone. The demon relayed the grisly details of his servant's destruction. Once they killed him by placing him in front of the court's riflemen, the 2 members of the order took his coffin to the tomb. The priest initiated the ritual. He rammed a nearly petrified wooden stake into his servant's chest and smashed his heart. The putrid blood oozed in splashes as the priest's hammer struck the head of the stake. A foul stench filled the tomb, a dead stink, a coppery smell mixed with rot that was immeasurable in its rancidness. The priest then wrenched the head from the body. He stuffed the mouth with garlic bulbs. He placed so much in the mouth that a few of the bulbs that were covered with blood began to fall from the open throat, dropping to the floor. The priest's accomplice placed the hands above the body to hang over the brim of the casket. He crossed himself with one swift stroke. He cut the hands from the wrists, and they fell to the earthen floor of the tomb. The scene was gruesome, and the two involved were extremely challenged to stay the course of what they believed needed to be done in holy honor. They gasped the foul air and held it within their sore lungs as they completed their mission. They turned the blood-drenched torso to face downward inside the musty casket, took the head and placed it at the feet. Then they stuffed the severed hands under each armpit. This was to ensure that despite any effort made by the vampire to reanimate, it would be impossible. They closed the coffin and took heavy chains, which they brought with them, and tightly chained it up. They loaded it onto a carriage and took it to the most remote, unknown cemetery to bury it, and forget it, and there it had remained for years. Lucifer recalled his anger that night as he slowly walked among the stones. As he did, weeds and dried growth shriveled and smoked as he waved his hands over them. After a short while, he eventually found what he had come for, his servant's burial. He knew this because of the disgusting psychic aura that was billowing from the ground where he lay. He knew it was him. He took a few steps toward it and spoke one simple command. Rise. The ground began to shake violently and separate. The contour, appearing to be the top of a coffin, broke the ground. It was covered with layers of mud and rusted, heavy chains. Once the coffin made final ascension and rested above the ground, the devil ripped the chains from it and tore the lid from its frame. The corpse inside was mutilated and mummified. It was only dimly lit by the blue luminescence of the moon. He grabbed the torso by the collar and sat it upright. The skeletal hands, which had been shoved into the armpits, fell to its side. He picked up the head, which was fused with rot to the feet, and scraped the shriveled garlic bulbs out of its mouth with his clawed finger. He then placed it atop of the shoulders. He took the hands that were at the corpse's side and placed them back on the wrists. As the mortifying corpse sat upright in the coffin, the devil spoke. Become. In a matter of moments, the corpse, which had been in pieces and rotting, was now complete and burned with new life. The people of the religious order interpreted my service unto you as vampirism. I know that I have failed you. The corpse rose its hands to its face. I know that's why you are here, to punish me, it said. On the contrary, the devil replied. I've come to give you the opportunity to damn those who have damned you. He continued. Now, surely this hypocritical religious order has spawned further generations and descendants. The corpse slowly raised its gaze to look at Lucifer. I have given you a second life, as well as the discerning to hunt them down, Lucifer said. What's been done to you was foul, and this will be the chance you need to have your revenge. I will say this, the devil continued. I will no longer be involved in your matters, because I have my own troubles to tend to. The gift I have given you, I'm positive that you will not misuse it. Master, my gratitude is endless that I will have my vengeance, for they wronged me twice, because you know I was not a vampire. The devil's face melted into a sinister, frightening grin. You are now, he said, and he slowly turned to exit the cemetery.